Everybody. I'm Susan Spires, and this is Christina Herrera, and we are your trustworthy coaches. And thank you so much for joining us for another Trustworthy Live. Boy, do we have a special one for you today. But first, Christina, so glad that we're finally reconnecting after all this time.
Yeah, honestly, it's been a long time. It's been too long, but end of year, holiday season, sudden jury duty has tipped my life upside down. And I'm so happy that we're finally coming together to reconnect and also to be able to spotlight Francisco because he's an incredible person.
He is. I was really fortunate to work with him when we were at Deloitte. He is currently at EY. He's the co-lead of the U.S. corporate real estate practice. So we were both in the real estate practice at Deloitte. And what excites me about sharing his secret sauce with our viewers is that I have never met anyone who understood that the role of each person on your team, in your organization, and in your network can really bring value to the success of anything you're trying to do. And in that end, he really spends time strategically and intentionally building his ecosystem and his network from a place of true authenticity. And I watched it in practice. I experienced it in practice. So the way he does it, how he thinks about it, how he leads, is incredible. And I'm really excited. I know our viewers are going to get a lot out of it.
Yeah, I'm excited as well. I feel like Francisco provides a perspective that we all believe we know and we practice, but he actually really does practice it. Because that
Yeah.
is consistently the feedback that I've heard from him is that he is a networker and he does show up and he is consistent. And so yeah, I'm super excited for everyone to hear the interview, to see the dynamic and the relationship as well between you both, because that's where this like the magic is. It's this invisible relationship, like the connective tissue that he has created long after you both work together.
Yeah. I mean, I think we worked together maybe, I don't know, 8, 9 years ago. And we still meet for a half an hour every single month. And a lot of what we talked about, and I think that our viewers will have the same issue is I'm so busy at work. I'm so busy with life. How in the world do I make time to stay connected? And he does it. He is an absolute role model in how to do that. And I think that organizations and clients and friends and family all reap the benefits of how he interacts with his world. And so let's jump in. Let's jump into this incredible interview. I'm really excited to share Francisco Acoba with all of you and would love to hear your feedback as you're listening to him. So be sure to, send us some feedback as you're in the chats. Let's
Awesome.
go.
Let's get in.
Thanks again for joining us and choosing to spend your time with us. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another Trustworthy Live. I am Susan Spires, your trustworthy coach. And so sorry Christina Herrera could not be with us today as she is on jury duty. And when jury duty calls, that's what you end up doing. And I'm really okay with today being alone in conversation with Francisco because it's really, really special for me. Francisco and I met when I worked at Deloitte, where he was my boss, my mentor, and I am so happy to now call him my friend. And why I wanted him and you, our audience, to meet Francisco is not because of, Francisco, your expertise. We'll talk about that, but rather how you built trust. And what I'd love for us to share with the audience is how trust, accountability, and pride all work together. We all really felt great about what we were doing when we were on your team. So what I'd like to do is to share a little bit about your background so you get your expertise piece. Um, Francisco has spent 30 years advising Fortune 500 companies and institutions. He's now a senior leader in, Francisco, is it EYP? How do you say that these days?
Sorry.
EYP? Yeah?
Yeah. Yeah.
America's corporate real estate practice. You're the global CRE services network lead. What does that mean? It means that you help organizations turn real estate and workplace strategy into a business, a real business value. And I was blown away. Your work has generated more than $1.5 billion in impact. And you are a global, Francisco is a global recognized thought leader and educator. I have been on the receiving end of both. And for me, it always comes back to trust. It's earned, it's practiced, it's lived. I am so grateful and happy to welcome my former boss, mentor, and longtime friend, Francisco Acoba, to Trustworthy Live. So, Francisco, welcome. How are you?
So yeah, no, great to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to connect with you in the group today.
Yeah, we've been trying to get this to happen for like a year now, right?
We
It
have.
took a while.
It's been a bit, but I'm glad we finally got it on the calendar.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit, Francisco, about so I worked with you for not very long, maybe a year or two, something like that, where I was on your team. And one of the things that really impressed me was how quickly and how quickly you built trust, not in me and in the team, but with clients and the organization. So why don't you talk a little bit about your journey, about how you got to where you got to, what trust had to do with it, and give us a little insight about who Francisca Acoba really is.
Sure, happy to. So, as you mentioned, about 30 years now in management consulting for corporate real estate. Um, Actually, I started my career at Gensler back
I
in the
didn't know
late
that.
90s. Yeah, so I studied architecture as an undergrad, and in my sort of transition into the professional world, I was looking for I had a great passion and love around real estate and business, which is what I did for grad school. But I still had a big passion around the built environment and design and architecture. So sort of as a good starting point, I went to the consulting practice at Gensler back in 1997 in DC, and spent about
So
3 years there before I moved into management consulting at Booz Allen in
So
2000.
you know that's kind of where we probably have a little bit in common because I was in architecture and ended
Yes,
up in the
yes,
consulting, supporting the consulting practice a little bit with Nelson. So
right. Yeah, so
yeah, yeah.
parallel
Although I was
journeys
in
there.
marketing and business development and sales, not necessarily as an architect. So you've got that on me.
I was not there as an architect either, right? I was there in a more of a consulting role, but yeah, but it was a great transition and really got to understand well, during my time at Gensler, the what I would call sort of the business of architecture and design, which is one of the key strengths of that organization. So it was a great training ground for me early in my career before I moved over to Booz Allen in 2000 and began the journey into management consulting. So I was at Booz Allen for about 5 years, and working with a number of great colleagues that from the industry and building that practice up. Moved over to Deloitte in 2005 to help build the corporate real estate practice at Deloitte. Was there for just shy of about 17 years, and then was brought over to EY to help do the same here. So one of the consistent themes that I've had over time is coming into an organization and um, and helping build something. right? Because typically the practices were smaller, they were emerging, for the most part at that time, and really worked with the organization to build something. And in each case, we did build a great cohort of practitioners and professionals and relationships in the marketplace, alliances to drive business, but also to drive strong relationship building, networking, and to your earlier point, that all comes down to building trust, right? That's how
Yeah.
you establish those foundational elements.
So we've all like, so that's great, and I heard about your success before I actually met you. We walked around Coronet, which is our professional association, and people like, you'd walk by and people would say, hey, that's Francisco Acoba, and I'm like, oh my God, I want to meet this guy one day, and then I end up working with you because people thought so highly of you. So tell us a little bit about what you learned through that journey, because when you build something, you need to bring people along. You need to be the leader, right? And that is part of your success, is how you intentionally chose to lead a group of people, or organizations, or clients, or businesses. So how does somebody walk into a situation, let's start with Booz Allen, and build trust within your organization in order to be successful as a leader? How do you do that? Like, what were your observations looking backwards about how Francisco showed up?
Absolutely. So I think really two key things that I guess I would highlight. One is for me was leading with building relationships, right? So whether it's at Booz Allen or at Deloitte or EY now, I've always taken the time to really get to know the team and get to know the people in the practice and whoever it is that be working with, but not just on a professional level, but on a personal level, right? So that's where you really begin to build a true relationship, and being available and accessible, and taking the time to not only meet people initially and begin to develop that professional interaction, but over time maintaining that, right, and continuing to develop that, so it's not just a transactional event when you work on a project together, right? Because even in consulting, even though we are part of a practice, typically in any firm that you go to, you work on a lot of different projects, right? So things can tend to become transactional if you don't deliberately and intentionally build those relationships at a more significant level, right? And some of these projects, some of them could be 4 weeks, some of them could be 2 years. So it just depends on what you're working on. But if it's a very short project, it can go by in literally the blink of an eye. So, having that relationship up front, or if not, developing that very quickly at the beginning of a project, and just beginning to understand the team and who's going to be doing what, setting accountability for each individual on the engagement or the initiative or whatever it might be, so that everybody's on the same page. Surprises aren't good, right? You don't want surprises, right? So just understanding what's expected of you and what you expect of others is very important, right? To do up front.
So do you think that that's what allows people to let you in to build those relationships, because of your clear communication, clear expectation building, really setting that? Because in our trustworthy labs, we do these labs, people were talking about how when the most successful projects seem to be when you start a project, you sign, everybody has a contract of scope, time, budget, and all that, but no real contract about how we're going to engage with each other, how we're going to work with each other, what's going to happen, like what does the deliverable look like, when, how, and what happens if. So it sounds like part of what you're talking about is setting those expectations so there are no surprises, which is really phenomenal, and probably how we
had so much success because we all understood the playing field, and we understood our rules of engagement. Is that what allowed you in personally? Because one of the things that as you spoke, I've always been amazed at is we have not worked together in years. And yet we still get together. We still are calendared. Not that we always get together once a month to check in personally. And we don't work together anymore. And yet you still do that. So A, what do you think allows you into somebody's life like that? And B, how do you have time? I mean, that's a lot of people for you to check in with once a month, right? And so talk a little bit about intentionality and prioritization and strategy around all that.
So it is a lot of time, but I think that if you really think about those relationships as the core, right, of how you organize yourself, your work, your just your day to day, right? I mean, I make time literally every day to try to catch up with one or two people, right? Um, so if I don't do that, I feel like I start to feel disconnected, right, from whether it's internally or externally. So I really try to make time to do that every single day, and yeah, you do need to, in many cases, well, of course, we talk about the unplanned, interactions and so forth that you can get, but our network is global now, right? So you do have to plan these things in many cases, and being able to structure your day, your week around, okay, how am I going to make sure that I do maintain these relationships is very important. I think that when you asked earlier about how do you enter or lead into these discussions. I think that outreach, one, certainly, right, and it's something that, to be honest, I find that a lot of other folks, other leaders in many cases don't do. They don't reach out, especially to more junior practitioners, right? So it's not about just building relationships with all this, senior leaders that you may need to interact with. I will do that, from, senior clients or partners in the business all the way down to, new associates, out of school, right? So you need to build the relationships across the entire spectrum. And I think that the insights and the the perspectives that you get from all of these different people really begin to that serves as a almost like a source of energy for me, right? As I'm trying to figure out, okay, how do I need to navigate the external marketplace, the internal organization, all these professional relationships. But having that understanding of the landscape is really important, right? Because it's very easy to get, sort of like just into your own little world and move forward. Things happen so fast and
So I
day
love
to day,
that.
right? Yeah, it's important. It's just important to have that outreach component.
And I think that is part of what you see, right? It isn't like, oh, he only talks to this group or that group, or, definitely it was, it seems more human to human, regardless of where you are in the generation. But now that you've mentioned
Yeah.
it, let me ask you, I've always wanted to ask somebody, and since you actually intentionally reach out across generations and in the workforce, is there a difference? Like, do the Xers or the Gen Y or Zers think about trust or build trust differently than the Boomers? I mean, is there a generational difference in how you have to approach each group, or is trust?
The foundation, I think trust is trust, right? I guess is a good way to say it. But so foundationally, yes, but there is nuance, right, in how you engage with folks from across different generations, right? Because there are different expectations that are in many cases already, I think, inherent to how somebody has grown up in the business or is just out of school, and have 20 years of experience, 40 years of experience, 1 year, right? That everybody's in a different place. So while, you're building trust through that relationship development, but also I find layering onto that um, an opportunity to exchange knowledge is also very important, right? So,
Yeah.
being able to now, as I'm, more, a senior in my professional career, to be able to provide that, perspective and experience um, is important, right? And it is something that I enjoy being able to do and to share with the team, but also don't underestimate what you can learn from somebody who's just out of school 1 year or 2 years, right? I mean, there's again different perspective. They think about things differently. They have different priorities, perspectives, approach to technology, whatever it might be. It's another viewpoint that you can take into your ecosystem, right? And use that to structure how you go to market, how you continue to develop relationships in the industry.
I think that is absolutely a perfect example of what I specifically experienced with you when working with you. And I want the audience to understand how important this is, and how it plays out in action. I remember sitting in team meetings with you, and we had to make big decisions, whether it was about how to, which clients to go after, how to strategize, how to launch something, whatever it was. And literally, I remember being so impressed that you had to make a decision and you went around the room and asked everybody, each person on the team, what they thought. Like literally, it was important for you to make, as a leader, to make that decision only after you heard each of our opinions. And what that did to us as team members, or what it did for me, I won't speak with the others, is I felt like I mattered. I felt heard. I felt like my perspective was something that was going to be important as it related to this decision. And how often that hardly ever happens, right? When you're in a team. And I was so amazed. And I think that that's the action piece of the philosophy and your approach that you just talked about.
I think it's a interesting point to highlight. I've always, again, I feel like you need to pull in those perspectives, those opinions, all those different, insights do matter. Um, in the end, as a leader of a team or a practice or whatever it might be, I do believe that individual needs to be then accountable for making the final decision, right, on whatever it might be. But it's going to be a more informed decision and more valued decision if you have brought the team in and you're leveraging their perspectives and their thoughts as well. And it's almost like from a team building and a sort of a change management perspective, it's sort of change 101, right? You want to bring people into the process so they understand, they have a chance to ask questions. You want to be transparent, as much as transparent as you can be, right? I mean, obviously, of course, in business, there's certain things that maybe you can't always, discuss everything, but be as transparent as you can be with the group, and then leverage that information to make the final decision. But when you do make that final decision, it's again, you're doing it. It's almost, yeah, like I said, it's like the team is making that decision. And I'm not talking about
Yeah.
everything has to be a consensus uh, uh, driven process, right? That's in the end, there's again somebody needs to be accountable for the decision from the perspective of the business, but it's going to be more informed and more valued through this process.
It, and I never actually felt that it was going to be consensus decision making. By the way, we always knew you were making the decision, but not before you had all the information, perspectives, and input. And I think the other thing I'd point out to our audience, which is coming through to me loud and clear is, one of the things that goes into trust is to be authentic and genuine and real about everything. And the fact that your philosophy is the same, whether it's reaching out and building your network across generations, whether it's with a client, whether it's with a team and a project, your desire and intentionality around being curious, wanting to have all the different perspectives, wanting to see things through the different lenses comes through as part of who you are as a human being, which is probably why across the board, when I pass you at an association meeting, people would say, oh yeah, that's Francisco, because you probably had that connection with that person at some point, and it was genuine and authentic, and you did want to know who that person really was.
There's something to be said for consistency in messaging and in approach. I feel like that allows you to, if you're consistent in how you approach these discussions or these situations, it almost sets the expectation around how you will interact with others and they will interact with you, right? So people know, right? But also, as we both know, right? It's all about the network, right? And we have both been very, I would say, prolific external networkers over the years. And again, going back to one of the first points you made, there's only so much time, right?
Right.
So how do you do this, and how do you make the time? Part of I think the importance of the consistency comment is if you set the standard, you set expectation, others will begin to send that message for you to a broader audience. So as you said, I do set very high expectations for the team that I'm working with and the folks that I'm collaborating with and myself to start with. But I think it's important that I think now to the point where before I even we'll pull together a team, that expectation is already set. So the fact that I'm setting the bar high, right, and that there's certain things that I do expect of any member of the team that we're going to be working on a program, an initiative, a project together, whatever it is. When others start to distribute that message for you, right? I think that's important, right? Because I think it's also part of the, again, setting the expectation, building the brand for yourself, in what others in the team will expect, what clients would expect of you, and how you would deliver on programs for them. Again, building trust, right? They know that you are going to deliver the program, the initiative, whatever it is. You're going to align with what's required, and collectively we're going to get there, right?
So great consistency, getting to know people, building the relationships and the network, delivering as promised. Have you ever had an example, I'm sure you have, where it hasn't worked and trust eroded and all of a sudden you as the leader still needed to deliver, like the organization's expectation of you and your team, or the client's expectation hasn't changed? So what happened and what did you do about it?
If someone tells you that over 30 years that they've never had that situation, right. I would lose trust in that individual, because that can't be possibly true. So yeah, of course that's happened, and there's always there's challenges with with projects. Something goes awry for whatever reason it might be. It's just part of the day to day, right? I think the most important thing is, how do you react and respond to that situation? I think you and I had a few of those back at Deloitte when we were there, right? There were some situations where some member of the team didn't deliver, or there was a program that was that was challenging for unforeseen circumstances. But the most important thing is how do you what do you do? How do you respond to that situation? And do you take definitive action to put a remediation plan, a response plan in place so that people will continue to have the trust or will regain that trust in you and the team because you acted quickly and you made
Okay.
the decisions that were required to reconcile whatever it was, right? If you don't do that, you let things linger, you let things continue to be undecided or unclear. That trust it becomes much more difficult to recover at that
Right.
point.
It's kind of like a festering wound or something. Like
Yeah,
if you don't take care
that's
of it
right.
right away. So how do you take care of it right away? I mean, something happens, you walk into a situation, you want to act quickly and you have to build trust. Is
Yeah.
there, like, do you have any advice for our audience as to things that they should be looking for or doing that's worked for you?
I think number one, it's come in and do the due diligence, right? Gather the facts, understand where things are. What get down to the specifics of what really happened. What was supposed to happen, what then did not happen, and why are we here, right? And once you have that, then you can, okay, now let's figure out again collectively what is the plan to resolve this. And at that point, it goes back to it's all hands on deck, right? The team needs to come together to deliver and reconcile the issue, right? And one thing I would also say is there's always going to be a stakeholder involved that you need to respond to, whether it's a client, internal, another internal account leader, somebody who you're working with on a potential opportunity, whatever it is. Put a plan in place and have the actions defined before you go back to that person, right? Because you can't go back and, you could argue that maybe you go back and say, hey, well, there's an issue, we're working to resolve it. But I always feel that it's, and that's fine. That's good. Transparency is important. But I always feel it's more effective if you can go back and say, and
This is
this is
what
what
we're
we're going to do to reconcile the situation. Does this make sense? What are your thoughts? You know, um, can we move forward with this plan, right? Again, to get their feedback, right? To make sure that they're on board with it, and then it becomes everybody's plan, right? It can't just be the leader's plan or the project team captain, whoever it is. It needs to be the team's approach and response. And I think that's another important thing is over the years I've always negatively reacted to um, what we do see a lot in the industry, unfortunately, but the concept of me and the I, right? It's people talking about themselves as opposed to talking about the team, the practice, the organization that they're with, and how you're going to collectively come together to to design, develop work, deliver work, or again, like you said, reconcile issues as they come up.
And so I think for the audience, did you hear that? You should not, cannot, it's not best to solve the mistrust or the problem alone. You have to bring people in the room and sit them down and co-create your solution. And do it as the team because the team has to deliver and work together, which you probably can't do effectively without trust because they have to trust that it's okay
Absolutely.
to screw up and to blow it and to have a problem.
I think it also comes down to experience and having gone through many of these situations over the years, good and bad, right? But I think that's part of the value that more senior practitioners professionals can bring to the table, right? That they, it might not be 100% directly applicable to this new challenge or this new project, but it's a starting point and you have a perspective, right? There are a lot of, as there's everybody's in a different place in their career, right? Even if they are also a team leader, practice leader, whatever it is, they may be new in that role, right? So they're developing their voice and their perspective and how they approach things. But then there's some of us who maybe let's use the term more seasoned, have been out there longer, and you've seen it, you've done it, you've gone through it, maybe multiple times, right? So you can bring that perspective to the table, and I think that that there's a value in that, and that also does help build trust, right? Because then people see you as that advisor that can bring. It's not just somebody with having an idea and a good idea or a bad idea, whatever it is, but it's experiential data, right? That you can bring to the table and leverage to build that trust, right? I think that's really important.
So you're not starting with a blank piece of paper. In other words, there is no blank piece of paper. You bring.
That's right. That's right.
Well,
And by the way,
yeah.
that's a really interesting point. So if you feel like you are starting with a blank piece of paper, find folks around you that can help begin to fill that in and inform that blank sheet of paper with ideas, concepts, what's worked in the past, what hasn't worked, how would you approach this, what do we know about that organization. There's all this information it's out there. You just got to find the right people to be part of your team and your network to inform that discussion, right? There's really, it's almost, it's fairly rare that it should be a completely blank sheet of paper.
So, Chris and I developed our trustworthy model, right? Where how do you build trust? And our model starts with self-confidence, that you have to really trust yourself before anything else works. And then just as a quick overview, once you trust yourself, then you interact with somebody else in practice and you trust that person, then the team, then the organization. So much of what you're talking about right now, to me, takes self-confidence, right? You have to trust yourself in order to bring your perspective to the table. Or like, am I making it up? Am I an imposter? You hear about the imposter syndrome. Is it me or is it somebody? Talk a little bit about what all this has to do with self-trust and self-confidence, and how do you build that in order to be a good team player and to show up in a way that matters and makes a difference?
I've always been a strong advocate for coming into a situation prepared, right, and informed, right? Don't the winging it, is hope, right? That's not a plan, really, right? It's just that's like, well, hopefully this will work. Well, that doesn't really work in the end, right? Typically, I mean, sometimes maybe you can skate by on it, but over time, I really am a true believer that being prepared for the discussion, informed, is a better model, right? And I think it allows you to build trust with others more effectively and faster, because again, they see that it's not off the cuff and it's a deliberate and thoughtful. So part of that is doing your due diligence, being prepared, doing understanding the context. That process, I truly believe, then really helps you have the confidence to help put forth ideas, and in the end make that decision, right? Because you're gathering, you said you're gathering information from a variety of different stakeholders and perspectives, but in the end, somebody has to make the decision. And I've that's something I've never shied away from is making that decision. I think it's important to be able to do that. But for me to be comfortable to do that, I want it to be an informed process, right? And part of that, comes now with the experience over time, and having done and been involved with lots of different types of initiatives. But earlier on in my career, it was very much, you're put forth with a task or an objective, and yeah, sometimes it is new to you, right? So you got to put the time in, you got to spend the hours, you got to figure out, do the research, understand what have others done, what's worked well, what has led to success in these situations, right? Um, and 25, 30 years ago, as we both know, it was a lot more difficult to get some of that information, right? So you couldn't just Google it, right? You had to really figure out, or go to ChatGPT. You really had to figure out, okay, who is in my network that can help me understand this and provide me with some counsel to take this forward. So that goes back to the importance of networking and building that ecosystem of folks around you that can serve as your, almost like your board, or your guiding, your guiding lights for the different topics, whatever it might be.
And I don't think we can emphasize that enough, because I think you and I both have built our entire careers through our networks, and how often I've had a question or something happen, even if it was around negotiation of salary. I'm going after a new job, and I want to be able to be fair in my expectation. Like, I don't want to so over, that the company's never going to pay me this because it's not worth this. And I don't want to be underpaid. Like, who in my network can help me figure out that piece? Or who in my network can help me figure out this scenario, coming up with a hybrid work strategy? Or who in my network, So I think that building that network ends up, as you're saying, building that self-confidence, because you get those different, you can have confidence that the answer is at your fingertips if you actually allow that to happen.
Well, yeah, it's like there really is rarely a situation where the paper should be blank, right? It's a pure starting from scratch. That's there's some of that out there, but that's the 5 or 10%, right? It's maybe 20%, whatever it might be, depending on what you're doing. But even in those situations where you do need to start from scratch, and it is a blank sheet of paper, again, as I mentioned, leverage those people, those individuals, to inform the process, and before you know it, you will have a landscape of facts in front of you, and examples and case studies and experiences that you can then leverage, as a leader, to make that decision, right? Or put a plan in place. Or, it's as you and I were involved, back when we worked together, there were some significant investment programs that we were working on, right? And in many cases, that some of which, there were decisions around, should we even continue doing this, right? Or should we, stop certain programs and try something else? And in business, those are difficult decisions, right? But because there's the time and emotion that's spent on certain things, and money that's spent on certain programs, but is it the best thing to go forward, right?
So that led me to another question. I don't think I've ever asked this one, and I think, whether it was our experience together, my experience in other companies, so often companies put us in competition, internal competition with each other, where we're all going after the same client, or we're competing for revenue, or we're, it, and somehow, for me personally, do you trust that person? Do you trust that they're not like going around you? And it's like an internal, it's created internally, and maybe not it doesn't need to be there, but it is, because we're all trying to get as much revenue as possible and build and keep our clients happy. And we all have performance targets, right? So, and those performance targets create certain behaviors. How do we, as a organization, maintain cultural trust when we are pitted against each other or so perceived pitted against each other in certain situations?
It's a great question, and I think that you mentioned earlier how we had a great team that was built around us when we worked together. And previous this goes, this is I was thinking about this morning. It's like 10, 12 years ago, right? It's a long time ago.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
we did have a great team, and part of the I think a differentiators for us was that we really did work together as a team. Yes, everybody had individual goals and targets and so forth, but we went to market as a team. We sold as a team, and we figured out. Okay, then who's best positioned to deliver X, Y, Z, whatever it is. But being able to work together in that process is really important. I think that's where you really get a successful practice and you can really truly build a successful team is when everybody's working together towards the same goals, and by doing so they understand that their individual targets, goals, objectives, whatever it is, are also going to be met because the team is succeeding overall. I think that organizations that bring everything down to the one every individual on their own, and every man woman for themselves, I think to me it's less successful, and in many ways also less fulfilling,
yeah.
because you are it drives certain behaviors. It's all about the individual and not the team working together. And it's I think you can get a lot farther and do a lot more together, right? But again, there needs to be trust. There needs to be trust there, right? It can't just be and it's and a trust, but also understanding. Expectations are set, accountabilities are in place. All these things, right, need to be there, and as part of the program for the concept to work, right? That's it's and unfortunately it's it if you're not deliberate about putting that structure in place, that's absolutely not going to happen.
So I'm coming in as a team leader and operationalize that a little bit for me. So I meet with each of my team members and they each have their own goals. And it's, I get theoretically we all function as a team where we succeed. When the team succeeds, I succeed. But how do you make that happen? How do you go from the annual, here's your performance target, to it's really not about you, it's about the team, and with that you're going to succeed and be lifted up? How do you get from the moment to the individual to the team? Any hacks you can give our audience?
I think that part of it is so having the discussion up front, like you said, right, is key. And acknowledging that as you compose a team for a program or a project or a pursuit, whatever it might be, everybody's going to contribute in a different way, right? So you need to figure out what skills, experience, perspective is going to be most valuable from each individual. What are they going to bring in some cases it might be a relationship. In other cases it might be the direct delivery experience. In other cases it might be a technical subject matter resource. And whatever it might be. Somebody might be the amazing at developing pricing and commercial strategies, right? Don't expect every single individual to do everything on this. Otherwise, that's if everybody could do everything, then everybody, sort of you hang out your own shingle by yourself and just
Right.
have your own organization. And if you can do that, great. But many of us I think to be able to work on that as a team and get energized, by that, right? So again, it's setting out, okay, what is each individual's responsibility, and collectively then let's win this. Let's do this as a team, and then we're going to make sure that your goals are met, right? So I think that it's important for leaders to be able to have that uh, the flexibility and uh, the ability to recognize each of the individuals for their particular contributions. And it's not just all about the sale or the individual sale or the direct revenue. You can get some, you can meet their objectives and meet their goals and contribute in different ways, right? But in the end, we wouldn't have won that project, or we wouldn't have been able to get that new client if that particular individual didn't do their job or play their role well in that pursuit or in that project, right? It wouldn't have worked. So, why do you have to, only bring it down to that, individual delivery goal metric, et cetera? I don't think that to me, that doesn't build teams. That builds cowboys, individuals, right? And to me, it drives the wrong behavior, and oftentimes it's not positive behavior for the long-term success and growth of a team or a practice. That eventually that model fails, because if everybody's out for themselves and people move on, they go to different places, they leave, they do this, then what happens? Right? So, yeah, I'm very, very strong believer in that approach.
I cannot believe our time is coming to an end, and there is so much more to talk about. And I feel like we never even talked about workplace and strategy and hybrid and what's going on the client side. And we need another, at least hour or 2 hours to finish this really rich conversation.
Come back and continue the discussion.
It only took us a year to schedule this one. I bet we could do that. One of the things that really impressed me throughout this entire conversation is the importance of not only genuinely caring about the people you're interacting with and showing curiosity about who they are, what they bring, what their skill set is, what their personal lives are, but then listening to what they say, but not just listening, hearing them and understanding them. And it sounds like that's kind of the theme, whether it's to build your network or to reach your goals or to, set up your project team for success and manage that internal competition, to get rid of or eliminate it as you can, the internal competition. There's so much here that I think our audience can learn from. If you were to give one last message before we wrap up, to our audience in terms of what is the one thing they should walk away with. That's what I walked away with. What is the one thing you'd like them to walk away with? One last idea.
I would just say, never feel like you need to do it all by yourself.
Right.
Right. I think that's taking the opportunity to build that trust, build the team, build that network, more effectively empowers you to grow, to develop as a practitioner, as a person. And yeah, you don't have to do it all by yourself. That's why many of us work at large organizations as we do, right? Because we want to be part of that process and that approach and that program. But even at the large organizations, it still does take somebody, sort of driving that process and building that trust and sort of inculcating that approach into each team member, right? About this is the way that we really can, more effectively and collectively succeed. I think that you can't underestimate that aspect.
And I can say, based on working with you, you are a walking, living demonstration of that. And Francisco, thank you for sharing all of your wisdom, your insights, and your inspiration to all of us and to our audience. Really appreciate you. Thank you for joining us today at Trustworthy. And let's do it again.
Thanks, Susie. Yeah, absolutely. Would love to continue the discussion. Thank you so much.